Mm-hmm.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to what we call Shrinked. And for those new to the program, we reach out to the global community where everyday folks can share their voices and say on a national and international platform what's really on their minds and hearts, and also share their feelings, concerns, challenges, whatever it is. This is that show where we can get that release that we all need every now and then. I'm your host, TJ Reid, and today I got with me in the studio Beijing psychotherapist, Mr. Liu Yan.
Hey, TJ.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the show. And today we have a subject that some may feel is a little bit lighthearted, including myself, but could have the potential to be very uncomfortable, maybe a little bit polarizing, but certainly something that most of us have experienced at some point in our lives. And I'm sure we've all had our experiences with it and may feel differently about it. So let's dive into this notion of platonic relationships. And here on Shrink, guys, we believe that mental health awareness is not only helpful, but essential for all of us to adapt and evolve in this ever-changing world. So joining us on the show, we have a couple of practicing professionals in the field of psychology who will be giving those who share their voices some tips. And hopefully, some of that advice will reach some of you out there listening if you're dealing with similar issues. And I think this is a good place to reiterate that this show is not a substitute for seeing a licensed professional. If you or anyone you know is in dire need of psychological assistance, please reach out to a professional near you so that you can get the right treatment specifically for your situation. So now that I've got that out of the way, let's hear a little bit from our voice sharer. And FYI, guys, some of the names on the program may be pseudonyms due to privacy concerns, which is totally okay. So let's hear it. Thank you so much, Creo, for sharing with us something that's very, very difficult. And she mentioned the 5 love languages, and this is a really popular book, and that was by Dr. Gary Chapman. And those were, I think, physical touch, acts of service, quality time, and words of affirmation, and receiving gifts. And I thought that was kind of an interesting setup for how love is exchanged between two people. She also mentioned a friend who's been around for quite some time, and I find this to be quite interesting. And I'm wondering if she, asked herself a few questions about this relationship. One of which is why maybe this person was a friend for so long. And what I mean by that is, what was it that really binded these two together? And I think sometimes in a relationship, we might ask ourselves that question when someone is around, especially if you have two people of, a male and a female who are heterosexual. You may start to wonder, what is it about our relationship? Why are we so, why are we hanging out so much together? And are there any clues in the relationship that this thing is purely platonic, or is there something else there? And I think that's something else that sense that goes off in your mind, that when you're around someone, is there something more either from your side or from their side? That's something else that I'm wondering if she has ever asked herself. And I guess, has it always been purely platonic, has it been mutual, or is it just one-sided? And I think that can be easy for people to kind of make a mistake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. I think that's also what stood out to me after I heard that clip, because like she herself mentioned, she was quite surprised when that friend from the South confessed his love to her. So obviously she didn't think about him in that specific direction or term before.
Yeah.
So like you said, probably platonic is not the key word when she thinks about this particular relationship. And I guess that's where she needs to figure out, is it just platonic, or is it something deeper, like you said?
Yeah, and platonic, according to Oxford Dictionary, and I had to look this up, it's a friendship or a relationship that is intimate, but there is no sex involved. And I think that's really the key element there. And there are varying definitions depending on where you go, of course. But that is something that's quite constant. And I have to say, from personal experience, I do believe that they exist between two different, a man and a woman, heterosexual, male and female. And because it has, I mean, I experienced it as a young man in high school. I had a friend that was a female, and everyone around me, no one believed that it was platonic. Everyone was just like, they'd look at me through the corner of their eye, and they're like, what's going on between you two? And really, there was nothing going on. I mean, we had the same interests. We were both into, I think at that time, animation. We were both artists, so that was something that we had in common. And I think it worked because there was no sexual attraction between the two of us at all. And so, but I think sometimes, in most cases, it's normally one-sided. Maybe one person feels that there is nothing going on, and so they take on this, quote-unquote friendship, but the other person may have ulterior motives. And I think that's where things can get a little bit difficult, especially for one party, at least. And I think it can be a little bit worse when the other person knows that that person is attracted to them, and they kind of utilize this friendship to, to get certain things or to, manipulate people. That can also be, it's an unfortunate reality, but it does happen too.
Yeah, it almost sounds like, people can be really selfish sometimes. They know that, okay, I've got the upper hand in this particular relationship.
Right.
So I'm going to take advantage of this dynamic and just, like you said, utilize it and squeeze every ounce of the good benefits that I can get out of it.
Yeah.
So I guess as long as you don't cross a certain line, like you don't actually reach the level of evil manipulation, a little bit of manipulation, I guess, is okay. After all, we're human. But I guess the bigger question here is you need to figure out just the exact components of this particular relationship or dynamic, because there's this very famous psychologist, Robert Sternberg. He has this famous theory. It's called the triangular theory of love. So in this particular triangle, you have commitment, you also have passion, and the last one is intimacy. Yeah, aka understanding. So if you have all these elements, then it's considered the consummate relationship or perfect love. If you only have one or two, they might be great on certain level, but they're not ideal.
Yeah, I think that all of them have to kind of be there. But I don't think you need to have all of them for a relationship to work. But will it work well? I think that's kind of the question. But before we get into that, there's also this other element of the platonic friendship that I think can also conflict with relationships. And I think that's related to when you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or someone that you're dating, and you have this friend it could be platonic from your side, but maybe the boyfriend doesn't exactly feel that other guy is just a platonic friend. Sometimes there's a little bit of jealousy that happens between the two. Like, for example, sometimes guys can understand when there is a chemical attraction for his girlfriend or for his partner, or maybe he perceives that. And that can be a bit of a problem as well, because sometimes ladies, I don't want to say just only ladies, because sometimes guys, we might miss the boat too, but oftentimes ladies, they won't see that attraction, and the males can see it and they sense it, and that's why they don't really want their partners to be hanging out with other guys. And so you have this conflict as well. It's just like, hey, it's just a friend. What's your big deal? Why are you being so jealous? And it's like he can't really communicate to her that I think there's something more than just a friendship. There's something else going on there. And I think that can also affect, can cause some jealousy. And I think that also shows a little bit of insecurity there as well. But at the same time, it's a little bit justified, because I think sometimes guys, and I'm sure ladies, it's the same, they understand each other a little bit more than the opposite sex. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's something there that sometimes we just miss.
Yeah. TJ, I see that you're being very careful, because every time you say something, you're like, of course, guys have this problem as well. But the thing is, sure, if we just say girls tend to do this or boys tend to do this. This sounds very typical or stereotypical.
Yeah.
But stereotypes generally are existent because they happen to be true. So I'm just saying, for example, when it comes to emotions, you just cannot deny that females tend to be more sensitive when it comes to emotional issues.
Yeah.
So they have this stronger need or bigger demand for the emotional connections, whereas guys could be sometimes a little bit dense or a little bit oblivious. So it's totally true that the girl could be thinking, how can you be doing this to me? I thought, you know me better than that. But the guy would be like, I thought that's a non-issue here. So that's completely understandable.
And I've been in the same situation with the gentleman that Creo was talking about, where he's the guy that's hanging out with a girl that he actually has feelings for, but it's not reciprocated. And so it really is that you do reach kind of a crossroads. And I think that's why she was a bit scared to go forward, because if you do go forward and it doesn't work out, then yes, that relationship is severed. But I think also it's severed anyway. I mean, once the person comes out and says that I have feelings for you, then you have to act on it. And if it's not there, then I think then it's a time to go. It's kind of sad, but you do kind of have to go your separate ways, possibly. I mean, unless the two are able to have this kind of communication. But I almost feel like that has to happen at that moment when that discovery is made and like there are feelings there. Maybe they need to have a discussion about where they want to go in that particular relationship, because if not, then there's just going to be this I guess miscommunication that could cause some other problems. And with that, we hope we were able to share this voice concern with Dr. Carl Anthony. It's not his first time to contribute on the show, and he's a clinical psychologist in Asia for the past 17 years. And we're certainly privileged to have him collaborating on the show. So let's hear what he has to say. And we'd like to thank Dr. Carl Anthony for sharing his thoughts and his tips. And yeah, he brought up something really interesting, the comfort versus the challenge. And I think that's really, really helpful, because you do have individuals who look for something that is comfortable, that's stable, that is predictable. And even though sometimes that's shunned by a lot of people, it's nice to know what your partner is going to do. It's nice to know what they're thinking, what they value, all of these things. And if it's close or similar to what it is that you value, it's a little bit more cohesive, I think, in the long run. And for some people, this, I guess you could say, monotony is a positive thing, because it's something that it's within their comfort zone. To me, it seems quite sustainable. But on the other hand, it could also be a little bit lackluster. It could be a little bit boring for some people. And so you have others who enjoy the challenge, someone that they have to try their best to support, or try to learn more about them and try to find some kind of middle ground. And some people, it sounds funny, but some people are attracted to disagreements and fights. And it's like it adds a certain fire or spice to the relationship. And that's something else that's an intrigue that some people are really into. And I think that you might encounter this a bit more for people who are outside of your culture, because sometimes the values are so different than what you have in maybe your culture. And some of the things that, for example, if this person is from a patriarchal society, that might be a problem for the lady, because she may feel like, he may have certain expectations of her that she may not be willing to, to deal with. And, vice versa. If she's from a very egalitarian society, that may be a problem for him. So that's something that they may fight about a lot. And again, I think both sides have their advantages. It's always cool to be in a novel kind of relationship where you're learning and new different things, and some of these differences might actually be, they might complement you in some certain way. I think it really depends on the gap or the differences between the cultures. If the gap is so wide, it might be really tough to bridge it, in a lifetime, perhaps.
Yeah. I agree with that 100%. And I also think Dr. Anthony put it very well, because the two C words he used are comfort and challenge. I think for a lot of people, they will say, well, I want to be in a relationship because I want to feel nice. Like I don't want to feel like I'm constantly in battle with somebody. So why would I put myself through this kind of torture? So if that's what you're going after, then I guess it's fine if you can just stay within a very comfortable relationship.
Yeah.
And there's no challenge, and probably also there's no personal growth. At least not much to speak of. That's completely fine. It's a legit choice. However, there's also the type of people who do want to be challenged, because for them, the number one thing is, I have to constantly improve myself.
Yeah.
Like, personal growth is my goal. Like, if I stay stagnant, I feel like I'm not being alive. So really, it comes down to what you want for yourself. And also, another point Dr. Anthony mentioned, and I think is really important here, is that he has stayed in Asia for the past 2 decades or so, right?
Yeah.
And he himself said that if that wasn't the case, probably, he will feel or think a whole lot differently than he does now. So I guess for Creo, that is also the kind of angle she needs to think about, because if she sees herself staying in Asia, for example, for the next 5, 10, 20 years, then I seriously don't think that friend from South will have much of a chance. Because obviously, you are staying like worlds apart, and he's in a different culture and you're here in this culture, and there's not much chance for you to cross over to the other side, so to speak. So you can never easily close that bridge.
Yeah, you got a point there. Well, I think I mentioned earlier a little bit about having that communication in the beginning and kind of ironing out what the relationship is. And this is something that I'm not sure a lot of people do. And it could be kind of hard to have this conversation to be very linear. And I think that's just communicating the end goal of the relationship. And some people kind of shun this notion of friends with benefits. I mean, it does happen, and some people are for it, and a lot of people would say they're against it because a lot of times it doesn't work. And I think a lot of times the reason why it doesn't work is because people are just, again, they don't communicate this thing in the beginning. They kind of act off of the passion that's between the both of them, and they don't really talk their way through it. And I read this interesting study, last year was released it was published by the Personal Relationships Journal, and it found that people who engaged or were friends with benefits, when they wanted to transition from that to being friends, they were successful about 56% of the time. But those who wanted to transition to a romantic relationship, it was only successful about 15% of the time. So I think maybe in the first place, there's something that's not quite right, and so that's probably why they never committed to each other to be in a committed relationship, but just mainly act off of the physicalities of what was going on. So I think that was a pretty interesting finding.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Now, I want to stress one point, because some people I know do tend to frown upon this idea of friends with benefits, and they can sometimes act holier than thou, and they go like, oh, this is beneath me. I will never do immoral things like that. My point is, we should just stick to live and let live. As long as it doesn't really hurt anybody, as long as everybody involved is okay with this. So it's consensual and it's beneficial to both parties. I say, why not? However, that said, the interesting figure you just cited does say quite a lot. because obviously when you transition from friends with benefits to actual romantic partners, the requirement suddenly goes up a whole lot because you expect so much more from a committed romantic partner. Whereas if you just expect a friend to do some things for you, that requirement is a lot lower. The threshold is a lot lower. So maybe you should, by you, I mean Creo, you should think like, what do you expect of a certain romantic partner versus a friend? And imagine if you require that of the friend from the South or of that friend from a different cultural background, which one do you think can handle it? And maybe the answer to that question can help you decide which is a better fit.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Beautifully said. So we were able to reach out to one other professional to share some advice. And joining us is Thomas Markersen, a certified clinical psychologist working from Copenhagen, Denmark. Let's hear what he has to say. And we'd like to thank Thomas Markersen for sharing his tips and views for this episode. What did you hear? I mean, what stood out to you from his tips?
I think Thomas mentioned one thing. She said Creo sounds very vivacious, very bright, very energetic. I think that's a good point. That's actually a great point because personality does come into play if you want the relationship to work. So, for example, if you are an introvert and your partner is an extrovert, that doesn't mean that this relationship can never work out. It just means that it will be a whole lot more difficult than if you are both extroverts or if you are both introverts. Because extroverts and introverts take their energy or restore themselves differently. So if you are an introvert, that means you need a lot of alone time. You need to do self-reflection. You need to maybe go into your own world and think about stuff. But the extrovert just doesn't get their energy fixed this way. They need to go out and they need to mingle with people and they need to hear that noisy background so that they can feel alive again. So again, personality is a big factor because it could cause a lot of clashes. You have to know yourself well enough. So maybe from Creo's angle, I think she should also consider personality-wise, who is a better fit.
Yeah, I think that's also hugely important. And she mentioned the word advocate. And she also mentioned that it's not in the 5 love languages. And I'm not sure if that's... So I think support is a little bit different. I think that when you're supporting someone, it's you have to understand a lot of things about that particular person. You want to know, you have to support where they're coming from, what they represent, what they want to do. All of these things, I think you have to be a part of it. And if there's something about that you don't necessarily support or understand, then I don't think it's possible for you to really reach their expectations or your partner's expectations. You will fall short of that support. So you have to really understand a lot more. And I think that's, and she mentioned that in her sharing, that it's not a walk in the park trying to understand someone from a different aspect or different culture. So I think that's kind of important. And support has so many different meanings. I mean, if it's emotional support, that's one thing. But what about financial support or, professional support? All of these things, you have to be on board with what it is that they want to do. Otherwise, you may end up having some serious problem. It's not impossible, but again, it's just something that you may have to consider that perhaps these differences, they're not just going to go away. You may have to deal with them, and they may come back again and again. And it may just be that you're hardwired different. You're kind of structured different mentally on certain issues, and that coming together may or may never happen. And if you're okay with that, then I think it's not necessarily an issue. But if it is, then that's something that you may have to think about as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point, because once again, this might sound stereotypical, but it's a stereotype for a reason. Most people in the West, they attach such great importance to independence, because that's such an inherent part of their values, their culture. Right. Whereas most people in the East tend to attach great importance to interdependence, because, it's a very collective kind of thinking. So if that's the case, then you have to constantly communicate with each other, because one tends to think this way, one tends to think that way. That makes the relationship a whole lot more difficult. So again, if you think this is too much work, and if this is something that you will never, ever agree to compromise on, then maybe this is not the relationship for you.
I'm laughing because I agree with you 100%. So, Creo, I hope that this was helpful to a certain extent. Somehow, I think even though your current relationship is a major challenge, I think that in essence, it's a wonderful experience in defining, who you are and what you want. And I think that these kinds of situations bring us closer to the person that, we need to be a better partner for that future person, or even that current person that you're with. But all of these experiences, I don't think any of them are bad. They're good because they're bringing you closer to who you need to be.
Yeah, I agree. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because at the very least, it gave Creo a great chance to showcase her bubbly personality and also gave her the opportunity to mention the great Anita Baker. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, and I think these two men in your life are definitely giving you signals, and it just depends on how you respond to these signals. Hopefully you make the right choice that's best for you. And for those who've made it to the end, this wraps us for this episode of Shrinked. And folks, we're actively pursuing more voice contributions for the show. So if any of you have anything you'd like to share or get off of your chest, send us an email and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. I hope your day gets a little bit brighter after listening in. And be sure to tune in next time for more sessions. I'm TJ Reid.
I'm Liu Yan.
Take it easy, folks. We'll see you next time.